Okay, so first of all, with the quadratic formula, okay, it's written here on the board. This says this. So this is the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and this is all divided by 2 times a. Okay, now the a, b, and c, these values come from the standard form of the equation. So if we have an equation in standard form, the number in front of x squared is a, the number in front of x is b, and then the constant is c. So if we had this, if we had negative x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0, what would the value of a be? A is negative 1, b is 3, and c is negative 4. All right? Okay, then we've covered this and talked about this previously, but we'll just re-review this here real quick. So it says if you were to graph a quadratic, 3 possible situations could occur. So the first one is that we graph the parabola and it crosses the x-axis twice. If it crosses the x-axis twice, then that means that there are 2 real solutions. So each of these points represents a solution. Okay? If we have a parabola and the vertex is on the x-axis, okay, that means that it intersects the x-axis once. And if it intersects the x-axis once, then there would be 1 real solution. If we graph a parabola and it does not cross the x-axis, okay, then what this means to us is that there is no real number solution. So there's no real roots. And this is what we'll get into in the next unit. We're going to talk more about solving quadratics, but in the next unit we're going to talk about solving quadratics that involve or have imaginary solutions. Okay? So for right now, what you need to know about this one is that in this case right here where we have no real roots, this is going to occur anytime we end up with the square root of a negative number. Okay, so if you have the square root of a negative number, then that tells you that, no real roots. Okay? So this first one would be, so like this first example right here, this would be like this problem here. You solve this problem, you get x plus 2, x plus 3, so x equals negative 2, x equals negative 3. There's 2 solutions, right? So if there's 2 solutions, it means it crosses the x-axis in 2 points. All right? On this one, this would be, like here's an example of one solution. So if I factor this, this would be x plus 2, x plus 2. Both parentheses are the same, right? So set them equal to 0. I get x equals negative 2. So there's one solution. So it only crosses the x-axis in 1 point. Okay? All right. So to be able to work with the quadratic formula, we need to be able to simplify problems that look like this. So let's just do a little bit of groundwork here for the quadratic formula. So in problem number 1, okay, here's the primary thing that you need to know in simplifying these fractions, is to be able to simplify this fraction. These 3 numbers here have to all be divisible by the same thing. So the number that's here, the number in front of the square root, and the number in the denominator. All 3 of these have to be divisible by the same thing. Well, we have a 4, we have a 1, and we've got a 2. Okay, there's nothing that they all have in common that's going to reduce those numbers, correct? Okay, so that one's as simplified as it can be. The next problem, we have 2, 8, and 2. All of those are divisible by 2. So we reduce each of these by 2, so this would be 1 minus 4 square root of 6 all over 1. Okay, so this would be my answer. Okay, problem number 3, 15, 8, and 3. Okay, 15, 8, and 3. Are those divisible by anything? Do they have anything in common? No, so that stays how it is. Okay, and then this problem here, we have 12, 3, and 3. They're all divisible by 3. So this would be 4 minus the square root of 19 all over 1. So this is what it would be simplified. Okay. All right, let's go a little bit further with this. So let's say we have let me change this. Okay, so let's say we have this. Okay, and we've got to simplify it. So first of all, square root of 16 is a perfect square. This would be what? 4. So this is 4 plus or minus 4 divided by 2. Okay, so with this, on top, we can add and subtract these, right? So this would be 4 plus 4 divided by 2. 4 plus 4 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Okay, so there's one answer. Then we have 4 minus 4 divided by 2. 4 minus 4 is 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. Okay, so that's how that problem would simplify. Okay, if we have one that looks like this, okay, so let's say we have this problem here. Okay, square root of 20, does that simplify? Okay, type it into your calculator for me. So square root of 20, plug it in, and what does your calculator tell you? So it tells you 2 square root of 5. Okay, so now to simplify this, all 3 of these numbers have to be divisible by the same thing. They're all divisible by 2. So this would reduce to what? 1 plus or minus square root 5 over 2. Okay? All right. So with that, that's going to make solving quadratic formula a little bit easier for us. All right. So let's go to, we're going to skip to this problem right here. Let's just get right into it. Okay, so we have 2x squared. 2x squared minus 5x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, so the first step is to make sure the equation is in standard form. Okay, is this in standard form? Yeah. Okay, so once it's in standard form, then identify the value of A, B, and C. So A is 2, B is -5, and C is 3. Okay, once we have A, B, and C, then we're going to plug that into our formula. Okay, so our quadratic formula says that we have x equals the opposite of B. Okay, so opposite of B. So whatever B is, we change the sign. B is a -5, so it would be a +5. So it's 5 plus or minus. Okay, and then this part right here with the b squared. Okay, I know you know this, but you got to make sure you don't make this mistake because of how you enter the number into your calculator. So when you square a positive or you square a negative, your answer should always be what? Positive. So if you type into your calculator, like in this example right here, if you type it in like this, if you go -5 squared, that's going to give you an incorrect answer. That's going to give you a -25. If you're squaring a negative, you've got to make sure that you put parentheses around that number, okay? And even better yet is just know if you square a negative, your answer has to be what? Positive. So the number that we put here should never, ever, 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 ever be negative, okay? And if you put a negative here, it's going to be really, 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 really wrong, all right? So make sure number that goes here, always going to be a positive, okay? So in this case here, b squared, which is -5, -5 squared is +25. Then -4 times a times c. And all of this is divided by 2 times a, which would be 2 times 2 times 2, and that is 4. Okay, from here, here's what I want you to do. So I want you to type this part right here into your calculator. So don't include the radical. Just type in what's inside the blue here. Type that into your calculator. Get that number, and then here's what we're going to have. So we'll have 5 plus or minus the square root of whatever that number is divided by 4. So what are we getting here for 25 minus 4 times 2 times 3? 1. Okay, good. So we have 5 plus or minus the square root of 1 divided by 4. Okay, what is the square root of 1? Square root of 1 is 1. So we have 5 plus or minus 1 divided by 4. Okay, so now simplify this. So we would have 5 plus 1 divided by 4, and we have 5 minus 1 divided by 4. 5 plus 1 divided by 4 would be 6 over 4. Okay, 6 over 4 reduces to what? 6 over 4 reduces to 3 over 2. So 3 halves. So there's one of our answers. Okay, 5 minus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. These two right here are two solutions. So how many times does it cross the x-axis? Twice. Where does it cross the x-axis? Okay, so it would cross the x-axis at 3 halves, and it crosses the x-axis at 1. Okay? All right, let's try this one. Okay, so first thing we look for is the equation in standard form. Okay, it is. So the value of A is -3. The value of B is +2. And the value of C is +7. Okay, so we have A, B, and C. Okay, now plug the numbers into the formula. So formula says opposite of B. So what do I write? Opposite of B. Opposite of B. So it'd be -2 plus or minus the square root of, okay, and then B squared. So what is B squared going to be? B squared is 4 minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A, which is 2 times negative 3. Okay, type this into your calculator. Okay, and when you type this into your calculator, what do you get? 88. Agree with that? Okay, now take the square root of 88. So if you type this into your calculator, you get 2 square root of 22 all over negative 6. Okay, now look at these three numbers here and see if they can be reduced. They're all divisible by what number? 2. So I reduce it by 2, and I get negative 1 plus or minus this plus or minus 1 square root of 22 all over negative 3. Okay, and that's our solution. Okay, let's take a look at this one. So we have negative 3x squared plus 6x equals 4. Is it in standard form? No, we've got to get everything on the same side of the equal sign. So to put this in standard form, I would have to subtract 4 from each side. So I get negative 3x squared plus 6x minus 4 equals 0. Okay, everything's on the same side, so now it's in standard form. So what is A? Negative 3. B is 6. C is negative 4. Okay, so now plug it into the formula. So opposite of B, okay, and this part right here, opposite of B. Okay, a lot of times the people that make mistake is think that this is saying negative B, and so they'll whatever B is, they'll just write a negative value there. You got to remember this is saying opposite of B. So opposite of B here would be negative 6 plus or minus, okay, B squared, 36 minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. Okay, and then again, type this, not the radical, type this into your calculator and see what that number is. Okay, what number do you get that goes inside the radical? Negative 12. Okay, now what did we say earlier about what does that mean if we get a negative number inside the radical? It's going to be, it means that there's no real solution, no real number solution. So for this, we'll put no real solution. Okay, so for right now, if you get a negative number inside the radical, then you're done at that point right there, and just put no real solution. Okay? All right, last one here. Okay, so before we can find A, B, and C, we have to write it in standard form. So to write this in standard form, what do I have to do? So I got to subtract 4 from each side. So when I subtract 4 from each side, I get 5x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so then what is the value of A? A is 5, B, -1, C, -1. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute just to type that into your calculator. Okay, so obviously the first step is just plugging the numbers into the equation correctly. Okay, so does everybody agree with this? Okay, then from here, the next step is see what number you get right here inside the radical. Okay, the number you should get is 21. So you get 1 plus or minus the square root of 21 all over 10. Okay, type in the square root of 21 into your calculator. Does it simplify? No. So if it doesn't simplify, then I'm done. That's my answer. Okay? All right, let's take a look at some of the homework problems together here real quick. Okay, so on the first side here, on the book problem side, okay, the first problem is this. And on these first 4 problems, it just is asking you to find the value of A, B, and C. That's it. So on problem number 1, before I can find the value of A, B, and C, what do I have to do to this? Get everything on the same side. So I subtract 7x over, and I get this. Okay, so now A is 1. Okay, so A is 1. B is -7. And there isn't a C, so if there's not a C, that means C is 0. Okay, so on those first 4 problems, that's what you're doing. Then the rest of that front page, okay, the rest of the front page we're solving using quadratic formula. Okay, then if you'll look on the back side, okay, so on the back side, we're given, for problem number 1, we're given this equation right here. And with this equation, it's asking us to solve the same equation 3 different ways. So first we're supposed to solve it by factoring, then solve it by completing the square, then solve it by quadratic formula. Okay, now this is the part that always makes me wonder about people when I grade this question on the test, is they solve it the same problem 3 different ways and they get 3 different answers. Is that very good? No. If it's the same problem, then what better be the same? The answer. It doesn't matter the method, the answer still should be the same. Okay, so for this problem right here, let's solve it by factoring. So to solve it by factoring, be x and x. What do I know about the signs? The last sign's positive, so that tells me they're both going to be the same. The middle sign's positive, so that tells me they're both positive. Okay, the factors of 4. 1 and 4, 2 and 2. What's it going to be? 2 and 2. Okay, both sets of parentheses are the same, so just set one of them equal to 0 and solve. So we get x equals -2. Okay, so there's our solution from factoring. Okay, now take the same problem. Okay, and let's go through our steps and solve this by completing the square. Okay, it's actually, if you've noticed here, it's already a perfect square trinomial. So we could actually just factor this from here and accomplish what we need to. But to go through the steps of completing the square, we'll just pretend it's not. So this would be x squared plus 4x plus blank equals -4 plus blank. Okay, so in completing the square, this is always my first step. Okay, get the x squared and the x on one side by itself. Move this number to the other side. Okay, then fill in the blank. So half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. Okay, then factor this. So this would be x plus 2 quantity squared equals 0. Okay, and then from here, what do I do? What's my next step? Take the square root. Okay, you gotta remember, completing the square, we're trying to get it to this step right here so that we can take the square root of each side. So it'd be the square root of x plus 2 quantity squared equals plus or minus the square root of 0. So we'd get x plus 2 equals 0. Subtract the 2, and we get x equals -2. Okay, so we solved it, and we got x equals -2. We factored it, we got -2. We completed the square, we got -2. Okay, the last thing we have left is to solve it by quadratic formula. So quadratic formula, we have a is 1, b is 4, and c is 4. Okay, here's quadratic formula. So plug your numbers in. So opposite of b, what do I write? -4 plus or minus b squared. So what is that going to equal? 16 minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a, 2 times 1. Okay, find out what number What number is inside the radical? So 16 minus 4 times 1 times 4. Okay, so I get, what'd you say? 0? So we have negative 4 plus or minus square root of 0 divided by 2. Square root of 0 is 0. So this is negative 4 divided by 2, which is negative 2. Okay, so if you were answering this question on the test, you get to this point, would you feel good about yourself? Answer three different times, right? So if you get the same answer all 3 times, then unless you somehow, against all odds, made simple mistakes somehow to get the same answer, then you should be correct. Okay? All right. So any questions?